Hi, welcome to another episode of Overnight Success. My name is Lawal, and today I'm joined by Fuad Lawal. What's up, Fuad? How are you feeling?
How am I feeling? Yeah, I think I'm good. We just did a lot before this started.
Yeah, so I'm sure that the flow will be very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first question I always ask some people when they come here, I give them a dilemma, just an interesting question to kind of gauge their personality. So if I told you that you had to pick one or two things, one was that every time you hit the expressway, a red light stopped you, or slow internet once the sun goes down. So basically you would have slow internet every night. Which would you pick?
Always the red light. I just now count and wait. So for example, the closest red light to my house, it stays red for 4 minutes. I already count red lights. It's also like at the core of how I think about, this is funny, how I think about control, right? So I always tell myself, like, if I'm at a red light, there's nothing I can do. It's such that if I'm in a hurry and I'm very stressed and I'm running late, once I get to a red light, I just relax because I'm no longer in control.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely pick, because like bad internet is like a toxic relationship. You think you're making progress because it is spinning, but you're not. You're going to stay there. And you're not going to stay there and be miserable. So please, no. Wait, how will my internet get worse at night when the night time is when my brain opens? God forbid, no. Red light.
I mean, I figured you pick,
Of course.
you pick that because when the internet is like the essence of the work you do,
Yeah,
it's just important. Hi, my name is Naira. I'm a lawyer, writer, and journalist, and I'm also editor-in-chief of Culture Custodian. Overnight Success is an interview series where I speak to some of my favorite creators and entrepreneurs on the journeys and stories that got them to where they are. That is, young, successful people doing interesting things. I don't think there's any such thing as an overnight success, or is there? Find out more by watching this video. And when you're done, please subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, and share it with as many people as possible. Thank you. Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Overnight Success. Yeah. Out of curiosity, talk to me about young Fuad. Where did young Fuad grow up? What did young Fuad love doing?
We moved around a lot. I mean, then until we no longer moved around. So I was born in Lagos Island. My parents were born in Lagos Island.
Okay.
My mom is Gongon, my dad around Rika, Andrew, but like hardcore Lagos Island people, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was on Lagos Island for a very, very brief while, but where we really were was Ibutemeta. So I grew up knowing we lived
in Ibutemeta?
Apapa Road.
My family church is in Ibutemeta. So every Sunday, for like the first every Sunday for like the first 10 years of my life, was spent in Ibutemeta.
Yeah, so like one building that is very, very imprinted in my brain is Archivi Memorial Hospital at Costain.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, so we stayed. There's this Jack on the estate. I actually one day I was in the neighborhood and I walked to the estate just to be sure that I didn't imagine it, and it was there. I think the only thing I imagined differently was the stairs. I somehow thought it was 20. It was only 6. So I'd been counting it as like a stretch of 20. Meanwhile, it was 20 from the ground to our door. So maybe I wasn't really wrong. Then we moved to Empire, Mushin area, then Ikorodu. Ikorodu was like the last bus stop, like where we stayed as a family. As a child, what did I like? I was a child that they would always say Makpami Mokbayami, because I was always asking questions. It also did help that they allowed it to some degree. I got decked here and there for that, but for the most part, I was relentless with my questions. From an intellectual standpoint, the person like who nourished me directly was my mom, but like my dad was the one who provided. So my dad worked on Lagos Island, right? He was a trader, family business, stockfish, and I just gave him a list of books that I'd overheard in school, and he go and buy everything. Like he just always came back with all my books, and then the person I'd read them with was my mom.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, and just I think I was just a very, very curious and fairly mischievous child. I don't think I was the good child. I was a child that just never got caught because I did all the bad things children used to do, all of them. Yeah.
So one of the things I find most interesting about you is, and it kind of shows in what you just said in terms of having been across all these different places and seen different things. But the thing in question is the fact that your mom worked in the Ikoyi prisons.
Oh yeah.
And I think like that is just so amazing because I don't remember what it was that you were. I think in your writing it has shown.
Yeah.
Because obviously you have like a sense of history or a sense of perspective that shaped around that experience. So talk to me about what that was like.
Oh yeah, that's a very fantastic question. So as a kid, right, whenever we would resume and they'd make us write that essay, I think they made us write it in primary 3. And it was like how I spent my last holiday.
Yeah.
And everybody write about Frankie's, water parks. I'd never seen those places before. You know what it looks like. But you see Ikoyi prison, I knew that place. I knew the people. Like, I knew them so well that, like, I'd roam around in the yard as a child, right?
Yeah.
And just play and walk into their workshops, enter people's offices, enter cells, right? Special cells. They had special cells then.
So special work for like high profile,
yeah.
VIPs.
So like drug cases, political prisoners.
Okay.
Abacha threw a number of them there. So yeah, like I knew my way around the Ikoyi prison very, very well as a child. In fact, in 2017, there was something that happened, an incident that happened in a school opposite Ikoyi prison, like along the street that's Ikoyi prison. So I was following someone on the team. Like he was going to struggle with like speaking to people, so I followed him.
Yeah.
And so when I got there, right, I just hung out like at a shop opposite the prison, and like trying to make small talk. I was like, oh, I have not been here since I was a child. And then she was like, I said, oh, my mom used to work here. And the woman was like, who was your mom? And I just said, IG. She just said, Nico! And like all of them started carrying me around, like, this. Talking like, and of course they already knew she was late. She was quite, I actually think now that, maybe it's the first time I'm saying it, but like she was actually an alien, like everybody just liked her and wanted to like hang out with her. Everybody wanted to like be in her life. So even, I think that was a big part of my childhood in the sense that I learned very early on to share her because we're only 2 kids, me and my brother, but we never lived as a family of just 4. That was me, dad, my brother, and mom. There were always people around. There was always someone who was staying for a few months. I remember living with her when, for work, she went to Abeokuta. And for like 2 years, I slept on the couch because people were living in my room. But yeah, like I think that there's a very, very important way it shapes my perspective, especially in the world we live in today, right? I have seen like the worst people in society have very full lives.
Yeah.
Right? By worst, I'm saying like people that society has deemed the worst and thrown in prison or weakest. And so like a thing I generally struggle with is the idea that like we look at the net of like we fixate on like an aspect of a person instead of like what they are, like the net thing they are, and just use that small thing to like decide everything. Because like this were the people. as a child, I felt like I was friends with these people, right?
You saying this, so like, there was a period of my life where I used to go to KK a lot, because as part of a church fellowship group.
Yeah.
And what you are saying is something that resonates with me, because I remember one particular guy who was in prison for it was a very famous case. He killed his wife. And you know, we used to go to prison, and this guy was almost like our fixer within the prison, where he would be getting people to come and do this, he would be getting people to come and do that. And then one day, I was like, I know this guy's face. And I remembered because I had seen the story on Linda Ikeji. And it was hard for me to reconcile the version that I was seeing within prison with the heinous act or the heinous crime that he had committed.
I mean, which we cannot take away from, but he's also this person. Yeah, so it's all, even like, so my mom moved from Lagos, the Nigerian Prison Service at the time, that is now I think Nigerian Correctional Service. Yeah. They were setting up a Bostal, like juvenile home, juvenile institution for juveniles. And I remember when my mom first moved to Ilorin, this was 2006, I was in like SS2. And like the bulk of the boys that he brought were my mates. Yeah. Like in another world, we are playing ball together. Yeah. Right. And so I remember when they first came, they just called me 54 because there were 53 boys that they shipped in from Kaduna, Abeokuta. So they just called me 54. And I'd sit down with them and hear like the worst things. Like a person who has started robbing at 9. Right. A person who like decked his parents. Like, so they used to tell me these things, and I'd be like, oh, mom. But in my head, I'm like, what the f? You did great. I go deck your papa. Do you understand? And you'd see this. I remember my mom used to say something, and she'd be like, "You look. I understand that you feel that yes, you're a bad boy, right? But pretend for me. Pretend." And these boys were pretending and like smashing their work, like pretending and like learning skills, pretending in quotes, right? Yeah. And it just felt to me like, because when people come to juvenile homes, like the charge is always beyond parental control. It's hardly ever that they are accused of a crime, unless like there's a very, very heinous crime, like, oh, armed robber, right? There were cases like that, but it was always beyond parental control. And like, there was this thing where it really just felt like environments and like ecosystems and platforms like are so critical that you can't fully absorb, like people need to take individual responsibility of their actions. Yeah. But it feels almost lazy to me to not like take their environment into account. Yeah. Right? Because I remember my lesson teacher, who was an armed robber.
Have you written about him before?
Yeah, Mr. Ethics.
Yeah. I remember that story.
Like as a child, I saw him try his best over and over. Like he came out of prison, tried to get into school, got into school, was in school, like doing tutorials. Like he had a reputation for teaching. He was really smart, right? Taking tutorials, Good Shepherd community, going from there to there, saving up money to buy, like he was saving. He eventually bought a photocopier, like did downfall to raise more money to pay for. Like I saw this guy like push, and like society just kept saying, just like kept conking his head as a child. Like as a child, I entered the room and like this is the person that went from like driving a Pajero in his early 20s, in the early 90s, right? Yeah. Because I'm robber. Right, a person like trying to like stay on the street, and like it's hard for me to just wipe it simply as, yeah, then why are other people not like committing crimes? Yeah. But like it's also not that like simple, right? So I think that's a single biggest impact of like going to those places. Like my perspective on people is shaped by like spending a lot of my holidays with the worst, right? And so you had someone who, there was this architect, was in prison for cocaine. So a big part of my mom's job was making sure people leave prison on time, right?
When you leave prison on time, so when
making sure, helping them get days in court, helping them hustle, all of that.
So that they're not just wallowing there.
Because Ikoyi prison's big problem was awaiting trial, right?
That was something that was also, because I remember the stats when I went to Kirikiri, it was, and I think that was also my first experience of SARS, in terms of going there, like doing legal outreach, and hearing people say that police just came, carried them and said they committed crimes that they did not, like they knew nothing about.
It's so wild, right? It's so wild. And like, I remember this man, he was actually an architect before he moved drugs. And so I used to see like ex-cons a lot in the house because they'd want Yoruba people now, or even non-Yoruba, they want to come and like greet and thank. And so he just came to our house, and it was like a tiny 2-bedroom, all this normal estate government flat. Yeah. And like I remember him using the restroom once, and the next time he visited, he came with a model of our house.
Wow. And
so it is as stunning as it is scary.
Yeah.
Because all he needed to do to understand our house was to go and pee, right? It's also a lot of how, like, I still interact with people, right? So, like, I have so much faith that people are able to become, I think it's the single most important, most powerful thing about adulthood for me. That you can wake up one morning and decide you're going to be something, and you can put in all the efforts
and work
and just work to become that thing.
Yeah.
And that's why when I see stuff like, for example, I saw a tweet one time, recently actually, I think someone was about charisma, about how you either have it or you don't. I don't believe it.
Yeah, so
like it was Edith's tweet. Yeah. Like I see how it's easy to say those types of things, but I actually don't believe it. Because when we say, wow, someone like oh, Martin Luther, like, oh yeah, amazing speech. Man has been entering speech competition since he was 15. Yeah. Like that same year he delivered that speech, the I Have a Dream speech. He had done 300 speeches that year alone.
Practice.
Like, so like I really, do you understand? Like I really believe that like people can decide that they won't become anything as long as they put in the work. And so that's why like the single most important thing I look out for in people is not like what they are. Yeah. Is mostly just what they believe they can be, and the way that people, the way you know, like, or the way you can measure it, even though it's just potential in quotes, is actually just enthusiasm. Yeah. And how much they're applying themselves. Yeah.
This is a very off question to ask, but I know you've spoken about witnessing Clifford Orji.
Oh yeah, that.
What was that like?
So it's so funny. Whenever they just bring a VIP to prison, right? My mom just come, okay, everybody wear your fight clothes. And all of us just marched that Saturday morning, Zikoko prison, and saw Clifford. I remember the first time I saw him, I stood away because there was like the, you know what the prison is, like the initial like pre-yard place, then that's gate.
Gate, yeah.
So he was at the other side of the game, the other side, and they're just like, oh yeah, ask him anything you like. And so I could not ask anything because I was just this tiny.
I mean, I'm sure you of now wishes that like you could be transported.
Hey!
It's like content jackpot.
Because like he kept saying, I never, maybe he's lying, maybe he's a pathological, but I never saw Clifford admit that he ate people. Kept saying, I need to chop people, but they smoke people. Because, and maybe it was just denial, maybe it was just lying, right?
Yeah, that's interesting.
But, and the more I heard from my mom, like passively, and the more I saw him, I have like a few weeks after, we sat on the same bench. Like, I sat on the same bench with Clifford. His best food is bread and beans. He's like, once he doesn't eat bread and beans,
it's fine, soft.
Do you understand? Not prison beans, because prison beans sucks. So, again, like I know the Clifford everyone knows, but I also know the Clifford that doesn't eat bread and beans. And smoke his Zikoko.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know, man. Like, and there were lots of them, right?
Who was there any other famous one you saw? Like up close?
So in the 90s, Abacha threw a lot of businessmen in prison.
Yeah.
Recently with archiving, right? Someone emailed me and said,
I saw this thread.
Yeah. Someone emailed me and said that, oh yeah, my dad used to have a newspaper called The Republic. You can come on. Would you be interested in it? I was like, oh yes.
What was his dad's name?
Otumba Ajayi.
Okay.
And I was like, and I saw his last name, Ajayi, Republic. I'm like this rings a bell, right? And so I used his work email, his work domain name, search for his name. I'm like, light skin Ajayi. Where do I know a light skin Ajayi? And I just clocked. Now, I was like, should I email this guy and tell him everything? Like, no. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm excited to come and pick up the papers. I went to his office. And then when we got talking, I was like, please do not freak out. But I knew your dad and he was my friend. And I was like, interested. And I was like, my mom is working in Ikoyi prison. And I was like, oh. And then we had this long conversation about his dad.
Yeah.
Now I think he was in his early 20s. He was in the phase of his life where he was trying to make his own way in the world.
Yeah.
His dad was trying to make him come and be to come and take over the business, like to come and start grooming him to take over the business.
Yeah.
Because his dad's rival was Shubomi Balogun.
Okay.
They were actually peers, right? And so, we had this conversation where he'd say something about his dad, and I'd be like, your dad just listened to me. He answered all my questions. He listened. And like, your dad liked sharp sweets. He liked cola nuts, bitter cola.
Yeah.
Always wore white t-shirts and white shorts. Always wore white in prison.
It makes sense of him being rivals with Shubomi Balogun.
Right. Yeah. So like, and it was like, it's interesting that you know this side of my dad because I don't know him, right? Because him and his dad were fighting at that period.
Yeah.
Right. His dad also did not allow him like access him. What happened was it was like a license issue. Abacha sent, I think he got more license than he should have, and Abacha sent him to prison. It was a case of being like overly ambitious. Like he started a newspaper probably because he saw Abiola had the paper and he's like, yeah, I'm going to do that. Yeah. So it was a very, very interesting, and there are so many like that. Like, oh, I think when Reverend King got into Ikoyi prison.
Oh yeah.
I become like a teenager and stupid. So I was no longer fascinated by just going to. The one I became drawn to again was when it was now my peers that were on the other side, right? And we gist and play, and they'd go into their dorm, I'd go into my room, right? There was shortly before, like early 90s-ish, I think, there was Guru Maharaji, and there's this thing prison does. No matter how powerful you are, when you enter prison, you actually first of all shrink.
But that's like boarding school for me.
Bruh.
Where it's like, no matter whatever, I mean, it makes sense that boarding school and prison are kind of similar because the premises, but yeah, it's like very humbling.
You actually shrink. Like, so when I was talking to him, he said that his dad never recovered from like prison.
That experience.
Like the word he used was emasculated him. Yeah, so like, and like it's funny because like it's not even the big names that were most fascinating to me, right? Like Clifford Yes was fascinating, but it was the other people. So there was this guy. I think he's late now. He was in prison for armed robbery, but he was such a fantastic boxer. So as a child, I just go and watch him box in prison. There was this other guy. Let me just say his name is Yemi. He was in a party, right? And they were fighting. Someone was disturbing him, looking for a trouble. And he just decked the person. And the person died 4 days later and he was in prison for manslaughter. Like, bruh, like, it's just wild. But yeah, that was, I should have been going on holidays, fancy holidays, but I was going to Ikoyi prison. Look at me now.
Okay, so at some point, you decided you went to university.
Yeah.
To study chemistry. Again, why chemistry? Like, how did that even happen?
Yeah. So first of all, right, as a child, I was like, I remember a prisoner telling me, "Oh, you should be a banker." And I was like, "If you want me to be a banker, why are you here?" So as a child, I was like, "Bankers are thieves, so I can't be a banker. I don't want to end up in prison." Then, for a period, like every child, doctor, right?
I never had that.
Well, you are from an intellectual family where everything, the way they were born, they're like, you wore columnist or Mati. And it was Nollywood for me. We tried our best. I just cannot get over the fact that every movie I ever watched as a child, the moment the doctor just says we tried our best, is decking.
Yeah.
And so I'm getting decked in real life, right? I'm seeing this future that I want to be, and someone is getting decked. Can you point? And slowly I started to get nudged towards the sciences because that felt like the place where the requirement was curiosity, even though that is false because like other disciplines to require curiosity.
I'm a proud art student and I would always advocate for like the social sciences because I think that's how you make sense of society. Yeah.
So it was like a thing of, and it was also this thing where I was always hoarding stuff. Like, there's petrol, I'm stealing petrol. Because I overheard somewhere that if you pour petrol on styrofoam, it becomes gum. I'm like, I see remnants of like drinks, like beer, water, and I'm like pouring it together and shaking it and seeing how long it takes for it to like sediment, all kinds of weird shit. And so, like, a family member came, I was like, you should be a chemical engineer. I was like, you know what? I had no idea what it meant, but it was chemical. Like, and then I started, like, as my mom just heard it, she started buying me science tapes. Loading me with science tapes. So it was that period of petroleum engineering, chemical engineering, which one will make money, all those types of things. And then when I got into uni, it was chemistry. I found out that the things I also came to like about like the sciences were the things where I could apply my own perspective.
Yeah.
Right. So
that was the stuff that was subjective and not necessarily objective.
Yes. So it's also like when I think about like a lot of the frameworks and models I used to think about the world, they are mostly like tied to like natural sciences. So like when I think about Jakpa, I think about it as osmosis fundamentally. Movements from region of lower concentration to higher concentration through a semi-permeable border. And so there are a ton of things, critical mass, and so that's why, for example, critical mass is like NSAS for me. I can't even call it like. People say, oh yeah, it wasn't for nothing. So it was not a failure because we are still building critical mass. Like things take time, right?
Yeah.
The elections. Oh yes, like Obi did not win, but critical mass, people like actually came out, like
right. Like it's building up to something.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I'm here for it. So that's how I ended up like studying chemistry, and it's funny because I probably would have practiced if not for. There's episode Saturday night. I was using my brother's laptop, and I opened all the job sites, and I put chem. I was like, I didn't want to miss the chemist or chemical. I just put chem in my search query. Just brought out like 3 jobs. Like the highest one was like 35K. Oh shit! I was like, everybody's always saying like, Fuad, you can write. I just put writer. I just saw 80K, 7. On what that was it though?
For stories, I was like, I've never before.
That was it, man. Like that was it. I kid you not. Like I just started applying to writing jobs. Though. In fact, I had 2 guys, Oshoma and Goodman. They were designers, and they always asked me for copy. And I was like, this copy, what's copy? And they're like, oh yeah, like copywriters, like in agencies where we work at. There are people whose job is, people get paid to write on WordPress. It was so wild to me. It was so in the context of the internet, I was a late bloomer.
Yeah.
I'm a late bloomer. Like everybody, I feel like whenever I interact with people, I'm like, really, like you already knew this like at this time.
No, but you know the reason why?
Why?
You were spending your time in career prisons,
Exactly.
like socializing with.
Exactly.
Instead of like playing with computers,
yeah,
go to cyber cafe and play with computers.
I didn't own my first laptop. Funny enough, my brother was the one that took me to cyber cafe the first time, but I used to go there just for game cheat codes. GTA.
Yeah, what about that?
GTA, go and cram cheat codes and you're not gonna play in your friend's house.
Yeah, what about that?
I didn't own my first laptop until like when I was about to do like seminar in uni. And so I always say this thing that, and I picked this from two Naira Life subjects. I spoke to 2 designers, both very talented. One of them entered 100 level, got his laptop, spent 100 level just faffing around and playing, right? And one day someone comes to him and like says, "Can you help me design a poster?" He can't, but he says yes, right? And he designs the poster because he wants them to invite him to the party. And suddenly he becomes a designer, right? At the time I did his Naira Life, his salary was over 1 million naira monthly. Second person, first son of a war veteran, like fought in Sierra Leone. So basically quite frankly, he's the breadwinner.
Yeah.
Enters 100 level, can already draw, like he's an artist, right? And doesn't get his first laptop until 300 level when someone says, "You're too talented to not have a computer. I have a scrap, take my scrap." Right? And so the moment he gets his laptop, he's working with it. Like he doesn't have time to faff and play.
Yeah, it's a work tool.
When I interviewed him, his salary was 108K.
Naira or USD?
Naira.
Okay.
Monthly. And like I'm oversimplifying it, right? There are more complexities and more factors, right? But like I really, really feel like whenever people say, "What will you go back and tell your 14 years?" I'm not telling you, just give the child a laptop.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to tell you, just take Lappy. Yeah, well, what are you using a laptop to play with? Because technically, like the whole writing thing started when of course, I had owned a laptop. First of all, I had to do schoolwork. And then when I was now like waiting, that waiting period, like uni, NYSC, now started like, and then grief, right? Now started waxing lyrical, slapping keyboard.
Okay, so your first job in journalism was Pulse.
Yeah.
Was at Pulse. So what was the experience like?
Oh, like I feel like everybody who is working on the internet should spend, I don't know about Pulse now, right? I don't know much about like the day-to-days of Pulse now. But like 2015 to 2017, there was something that was happening there, right? First of all, it was the fact that it was a very, very intense performance-driven newsroom. We also had access to this global network that was Ringier.
Yeah.
Right? And so when I joined Pulse, I joined in 2015. My first beat was every beat. I was on the night shift.
Okay.
And here I was like having to write like 20 articles a day. And it's funny, right? Because like it's one of the interesting ways that like Google sneezed and everybody cut code, right? Publishing on the internet meant volume had to go up, and the volume goes up, quality just disappears.
Yeah.
Right? And so I remember in my first week, I really wanted what I was writing to be like to look good.
Yeah.
And
it's stuff that you were proud of.
Yeah. Like I remember reading, there was this blog then, I think it was a Chalk City blog, MEDC.
Don't remember it.
I remember reading Jason Abaga. He wrote a listicle, and I was like, it was about like 5 Nigerian figures that deserve their own movies, like political figures. And I was like, I can write, like, I can actually write this.
Yeah.
And then I kept trying to squeeze it into my KPIs. So I'd work on stuff that I'd find interesting. Then when it's time for like my shift and my 20 articles, I'll just slot it in as like maybe number 18. And quite frankly, like I was not hitting. There were people who were always hitting their
Your
20s, 20s, 23, God. And like, we would see the leaderboard every time. I mean, I'd just be there like, struggling, like at 12, 13, 14. Miracle, I did not fire me, Sha. But like, by the end of the year, I had a moment where I knew I had to leave. I had this like interesting idea. Of course, always ideas.
Yeah.
They probably were right, because like everybody had business deliverables. I mean, I'm probably a stupid idea, right? I was like, oh, let's make this type of thing. Let's make this type of thing. And it was just a thing of like just deprioritizing. I was like, nah, I can't really. So my headspace just entered. Anything that comes, I will take. Now, by November, someone in the business just came to the office and said, yo, Fuad, come outside, 5 minutes. And I came outside and I was like, do you know Chude? I was like, yes. Yeah. I didn't really know Chude at the time. I knew of him, but I didn't really know him. I was like, yeah, I know him. And I was like, oh yeah, Chude is working on this thing. And he'd like it too. I was like, oh yeah, sure, I'm down. So and it was like, Bilimo. And I was like, yeah, sure. Till today, I don't know how to bill, which is a problem. My toxic trait. It's always time for billing. I'm like, yeah. That's my toxic trait. And like interviewed with Chude. And by January, I resumed that Party Jollof. This interesting experiment.
It's supposed to be like a BuzzFeed type thing. Yeah.
And it became.
But it didn't last very long.
No, it did not. Actually, it lasted like. That iteration lasted like 9 months. I think it paused for a while, then it brought it back up as another thing, or another type of thing. But like that was this. So at pause, I understood the online media engine, right? You are seeing like stories, and you are seeing stories. You are seeing what happens when you publish them. First of all, you understand how to find them. Now, by virtue of Ring Gear, we had access to very interesting tools. There's this thing called CrowdTangle before Facebook acquired it. CrowdTangle, so you see a story and you say this story is doing well. CrowdTangle knows before it does well, and it's simply so CrowdTangle doesn't look at how much mileage it has done. It looks at acceleration. So instead of saying, oh, this story has done 10,000 views, it says this post is doing, like say, 50 views per second. At this rate, it's going to go viral. And so, at Pulse, we learned time to market from BBC, like studying BBC, studying Reuters. And so we know that the most important thing is to be the first headline people stumble on. If we're not going to break, we're going to be the second. Right? That was where we learned those things. That was where I learned those things. And so we'd see a story before it blows. We do our spin, quote them and say according to, right? But the bulk of the views are going to come to Pulse.
Because vultures, man.
And then Pulse had this massive distribution. So it wasn't even that big then, but like Pulse invested so much in distribution. And Pulse's moat today, as far as I'm concerned, is the distribution. It's the most distributed online publication on the internet today. Like massive team. But like it was when I worked with Chude, I actually understood like the media ecosystem. So we'd have long discussions where we'd read about like Gawker. It was in the middle of the Gawker drama. Like I was learning about like Gawker and the New York media culture. I was learning about like BuzzFeed and all these media businesses and how they work and think. And I was also now having this place where I'd literally write anything I liked, because it was like a lab and we're just experimenting with anything. Yeah. Some stuff slapped, most of it did not, as usual. And so I left because Osage was like, oh, I like what people are doing there.
Come and do it here.
Come back and do it here.
You see, so that's what I was going to ask you about, because the idea of going back to an old job, because I think...
I'm a master.
Yeah, but no, because a lot of people struggle with it. There's like, sometimes they might feel like maybe you're regressing, but as someone who has done it as often as you have, what is it like? about the walk us through that.
So going back to Pulse, right? One big insecurity that I had throughout my time at Pulse was when Osage was like bringing me back, we're having our first meeting. He called me Pogba. I was like, fuck, Pogba is overpriced. Or everybody thought Pogba was overpriced.
Yeah.
And then it was underperforming, and I was like, hey, God of mercy. So, but he was even just saying, oh, like, hey, Starboy, this, that, because I left as an associate, entry level.
Yeah,
and I was coming back as a senior associate. After like, what, 9 months, right? So all the people I started with, I was now like their seniors. Yeah, so like for me, it was mostly a thing of, this might be bad advice, right? But I'm not the most, when I think about the future, I'm not the most obsessed about like career. I think of career as something that, in hindsight, even strategy, when I'm talking about the future, I don't like using the word strategy. Because a strategy only tends to make sense in hindsight, right?
Because it's that thing of victory, history being told by the victors.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, we applaud this strategy. How many did you try and failed? Yeah. Right? And so for me, when I think about the future, I think about capacity. And so going back, it felt like I was going to have a more specific bit. I was going to be more responsible for like more like important thinking and stuff. Actually, going back when we were talking, I was supposed to go and be editor of communities, right? Better salary, not what I wanted, never what I wanted. And then just before I joined, someone else was hired to come and be editor, and I was just senior associate. I actually did not mind because it meant that
less responsibility.
Yes. Money was still the same. Actually, I did not mind at all. But as I got back, I quickly realized that the come back and do it here, there's also like a platform factor.
Because it's just not a culture fit.
Exactly. Yeah. And I started getting restless. Now, a few months earlier, in 2016, I think ADT had traveled with some anarcho people to Bauchi. And I'd seen like drone shots. And I remember messaging everybody in my...
that's also it's a callback because we're in like Black Book time and everyone has obviously from like up north to that, but just basically being able to trace that like trajectory and also seeing the impact it had on you.
Yes, and I was like, what? I just messaged my group chat like, guys, everybody cancel 2 weeks in December, we're all going to Bauchi. But as I got back to Pulse, I knew that there's no way you're getting 2 weeks in December. Everybody is plugged in December on the work. And somehow around that period, the idea of traveling around Nigeria started to like grow and grow in my mind. And I remember going to Arcade that November, I think it was November, and telling everybody I ran into that, oh, I'm going to travel around Nigeria. I didn't know how yet. Then, December 31st, I was at the office with Shea, Quino, and one of my guys, Oshoma.
Second time you mentioned it.
Yeah, like Oshoma was my seat partner in SS1. Right, like Oshoma is how I became a GTA nerd. Like he was a game nerd. Like that period where I did not know what was going to happen in my life. Like I had a couple of shoulders.
Yeah, like anchors that were holding.
Exactly, and it was one of them. And we had the office to use Pulse's super fast internet to download movies for the long holiday, for the next few days at least. And then Osage just branched at the office. He was going to church. December 31st, and I was like, yo, Osage. Shea was like, tell him, and I was like, Osage, so there's this thing I want to do. I want to travel around Nigeria. I want to do it with Paul. So I was not like, yeah, but we need to figure out how to. So Osage is enthusiastic about ideas, right? But he also understands that, like, where he is, that's not the priority. The priority is bottom line. And so he doesn't outrightly reject them most of the time. He just like, nudges you on like,
entertains it enough that so he's not dismissing you. But
exactly. So I was like, he just said, we need to figure out how to pay for it. I said, oh, okay. January 15, like around 8 p.m. when Osaga is about to wake up from his post newsroom shaking nap, I just went, and as I was getting I was just waking up. I was like, yeah. So remember that thing I told you I wanted to do? So this is the itinerary. Yeah. Okay. So how are we now going to on spreadsheets? I'll show him a list of potential brands. It was not like, fantastic, we are doing this shit. I was like, ginger.
And it happened. Okay.
It wasn't that simple.
No. I know.
Yeah, because what now happened was editorial was down, but sales didn't get it because sales didn't start selling stuff like that. They only knew how to sell new inventory at the time, understandably.
Yeah.
But now we're selling like branded content, brand partnerships, and all of that. Long and short of it is that that was how I learned like how to like do sales, right? To some degree, because I had to like walk up to people in public, me that non-confrontational, super shy, everything, super shy to strangers. I had to walk up to people and like speak to them and say, "Oh, I'm doing this thing. I want you to back it." And somehow we closed Samsung and Access Bank and paid and like the cost of traveling with 10x it in revenue.
That's good. So another thing that you've done is you used to be editor-in-chief of Zikoko.
Yes.
And it feels like everything kind of happened very quickly because you went from Pulse to Party Jollof / Wine Niger back to Pulse, and then you entered like the Big Cabal building and you were leading Zikoko. So talk to me about that experience, how definitive it was for you.
Yeah, so first of all, like me, right, I generally feel very lucky. Whenever people talk about like horrible manager stories, I mean, my managers were not perfect.
Yeah.
But like, I've mostly had managers who had faith in me, right?
So who are you at Zikoko? Was it Tomawa?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was very funny. I just quit at Pulse. My problem at Pulse was that my imposter syndrome was getting horrible. I just come back from traveling around Nigeria. I was kind of a rock star inside and you have like almost 200 people in a building and everybody's like, Fuad. It was super awkward. Many of the people that were at the company when I got back
were not there when you...
were not there before I left. So I just felt very, very, what am I doing here, right? And so I also was very, very restless. It happens when you travel for a long time. So I was like, I'm just going to become a freelancer, right? And then I'd already like spoken to Rotinwa and Eromo. Those were not the gatekeepers, they were the gateways. Then when you wanted to become a freelancer, you just go and meet them and they just do all the intros. I then started queuing like places I'd pitch with Rotinwa and everything. And I just had coffee, Bankole.
Yeah.
Just said, oh, you should talk to Tomo. And I had coffee with Tomo at Vesta. And Tomo filled me with, if Tomiwa pitches you, God, you're going to abandon whatever you're doing with your life and follow him. And I remember that day, one argument I used to have with Osage then was that we are publishing over 200 stories a day. And there's a lot of interesting things people are doing underneath. Yeah. Like, can we figure out a way to like surface that good stuff? Like the way BuzzFeed was doing BuzzFeed Reader, right? Yeah. And just like, it just even helps with perception, because there was also the perception that once it's Pulse, it's trash. Yeah. Right? Especially with people who likes to read stuff that I like to read.
So the Pulse problem was that the numbers guys would love it. Yeah. But like, it wasn't truly beloved by people in the community you were probably aspiring to be. Yeah. You wanted to create like impactful stuff.
Yeah. And I was like, like people are making stuff they enjoy. Let's give it love. But it was like it was two things that mattered: reach and revenue, understandably. And then Tomo was like, oh, let's try to build a business around those things that matter. I was like, sign me the fuck up. In fact, like, I remember that one Saturday I sat Nana and Samson at Pulse's office one Saturday, and I made a long list of all the verticals I was thinking about. Yeah. And we went on I just transferred all those verticals into Zikoko, right? So when I even joined Zikoko, I joined from my last role at Pulse, content strategy, because now I was no longer in the newsroom, I was now on the business side. And then one day, because I was more and more responsible for Zikoko, it was a thing where we were trying to sell, but to sell, you need a new product. So I was going back and back to product, and one day was like, he just said, Fuad, I know you're avoiding this, you're hiding, but henceforth, you're editor-in-chief of Zikoko. And then that was how that happened. Yeah, I think the most important thing I'd say happened there was, first of all, it was like we got back. So Big Cabal had grinded to an almost halt for a few months. Tech Cabal was running, Zikoko had grinded to a proper halt, like flatlined, almost flatlined with Google Analytics. And so we had to like start to like wake up the engine, right? And so it was like, and it's so important to always keep this in mind, right? Because we're working so hard and we're not seeing any results. We literally like we're slapping everything on the wall for 9 months, right? And suddenly it looked as if, wow, these people, wow, it's a lie. Like that was the one that slapped. And so after then, it felt like it's like momentum, right? The amount of energy requires to push a vehicle at rest to make it like move faster, compared to when it's at top speed and it just like somersaults. I think being part of that experience was very, very critical for me. That was where I learned how to be a manager. That's where I learned like how to like move. That's when I understood that it's important for me to be like, if I want to be part of a thing, I need to be able to see how I move it from one point to another significant point.
So saying that, it takes me to a question I really wanted to ask you. So another thing about you is that you have a very wide network. And I say this as someone, like once I was talking to a SAGs, because I think I was listening, they were having a conversation on Loose Talk. Yeah. In terms of like, you know, like the PayPal mafia, they were trying to talk about it in terms of like Nigerian media. Yeah. And they were talking about Big Cabal. And I think I remember I was texting him, I was like, because I think there was someone else that was kind of winning. And I was like, you know, like this Big Cabal one, you know, Kotti came out of there. And was like, huh? I was like, how is Fuad your guy and you did not know this? But you were able to build like a very solid pipeline of talent where, and I say this because I still see the reverence they hold you after they've left like that building, where Kotti is like, oh, Fuad told me this thing and it stuck with me. But what are the things that you look for with young talented people? What are the things that basically makes them, like, what are the things that will get them the seal of approval?
I should call Kotti and say, Kotti, send low CV. She will sticks here. Kotti's bag is massive. Heavy. Gives me so much joy. So there was a period where we didn't know what it was. And it's very interesting how this thing happens. We knew there was a thing to look out for, but we didn't know exactly what it was. I mean, people understand it to mean culture fit now. Yeah. Right? But I think the process, like nailing the process, that happened with Okpe at the DJ. Yeah, another very talented person. Yeah, so Okpe joined Zikoko from Wida Books. I remember the moment I knew that like I had to work with Okpe. It was Ake, the one that happened, the first one they did in Lagos. And I was trying to have a conversation with her. And she was just scanning the floor because she was working there. She was one of the organizers. She was just scanning the floor. Was this the one in the mainland? Yeah, the one at Skeja. Yeah, I remember that. That was the first one. Yeah. And she was just scanning the floor. And she was like listening and like answering, and she was scanning the floor. And I said, Fuad, I have to go. And she just went back into it. I was like, man, I have to work with this person. I remember that moment. We did this thing where we're trying to figure out like how to hire people. At this point, like we had like Kotti, but there's this thing I always think about where it's like optimizing for redundancy, right? And so I used to tell my team in 2018 is that I need people to get so good that I become fireable in 6 months, right? Who becomes fireable in 6 months? Me.
Because what, you're not worthy of managing them or what?
Yeah, because they've gotten so good. Like if I did not step up, I have now become incompetent to be their manager.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
I'm going to start using that one.
Yeah, so it's like, and it would get so good, and it's like, it's funny because like the team actually got like really good, right? But it was still very scattered. It was still very, very scattered and chaotic, fairly chaotic. A couple of grounding elements that was stuck in, very, very grounding. But it was when Okwe came, we now had a system, and the first proof of that system was. I was also not yet confident enough to say it, but I always looked out for curious people, and I always looked out for people that had, like, they just had one discontent, like they just had something that, like, they just wanted more. Whether they wanted to be better at stuff, whether they just felt like this is not good enough, like how can I make it better, and it did not have to be great, right?
Just had to be better.
It just had to, like, there just had to be a need to make it better. And so, in a sense, now that I think about it, it feels like Crowd Tango again, where Crowd Tango was not looking out for stories that have already performed well, but looking out for stories that were actually like building, like garnering
that have potential.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, we tested that process, hired 4 people out of that process, like incredible people, and it was like, and then we just started trying it again. And we just kept like hiring really good people. Yeah, so again, it was still that same idea of you hire someone, right? You give them the type of like ownership that they will never find anywhere else, and then you figure out a way where they do their best work. The business also like makes a shit ton of money. Okay. Right.
I think typically, I would say that the defining theme in a lot of your work, and again, this might be simplistic because it's looking at the most high-profile things, is they're very ambitious. So I'm looking at you driving around Nigeria initially.
Public transports, actually.
Okay, so you going in public transports around Nigeria to Jollof Road.
Yeah.
To even now what you're doing with the stadium and archiving. Yes. So where does the sense of ambition come from?
I think part of it is that I think I'm a bad everyday employee. See, like, it's so important. Like, I actually, when I say this, sometimes it sounds like I'm being humble, but I honestly do not think Zikoko, like, Zikoko while I was there, would have mattered much without like the team. And I'm like, I have very, very specific cases, like for example, like shaping the team, the newsroom itself, right? It couldn't have been possible without Toke, right? Toke was the first, okay, this is what we want from like a writer on the team. Then like structure and systems, that was Okwe. And I like to think about it as, if you watch Blacklist, the relationship between Reddington and Mr. Kaplan, or if you watch Narcos, the relationship between Pablo and Gustavo. Like, when those figures live their lives, everything just like falls apart. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that, because I remember even when I was trying to pursue like traveling around Nigeria post-36, right? Like my newsroom stuff was suffering. Right. I remember the day Access Bank told us they were giving us money. I remember getting a message from Princess, who went to BBC.
Yeah, Princess, low stock producer.
Yeah. And Princess was like, Fuad, why am I not seeing your stories? And I was like, in my head, I was like, what are you talking about? I just made that I just made that sound. What are you talking about? So like, I think is that I also think that I consume so much aggressively, and I'm like I want to make these things I'm saying. Like I want to like try. I want to see how much it will stretch me. I think that's probably why. For example, like Vistanium, my main discontent with Vistanium is like, why is it that when I really want to read like or consume like really good long form or just really well told stories, like why do I have to go to whether it's Vox for video or New Yorker, all this. Like, I know that becoming those things like will take time, right? I have a group chat, and I was telling them that it's really wild. Everybody's like, oh yeah, like, oh, and black, but it's actually like momentum of like over 10 years that made like Black Book.
Yeah.
When I was thinking about Vistanium, like much earlier in the year, I realized that like, oh wow, oh 824 is like 824 in that market is in like what, a decade, right? It took them a decade. I'm looking at Vox. It took them like a decade to, right, to get to like wherever Vox is now. So in my head, I'm like, you know what, like what does it look like to think about something in the context of a decade? That's kind of like where my framing is at. But I also suspect that I'm just a bad everyday employee. Okay.
Another thing we've spoken about, I mean, it's funny we keep mentioning Black Book, but like a list of, if you look at like all the people you worked for, it's like the Black Book, like cap table, executive producer. So I'm talking about obviously working with us SAGs at Falls. You worked briefly at Flutterwave. I don't know if you worked in the GB or E iteration. So
it's very interesting. So I was supposed to go to Flutterwave, not Big Cabal, because as I started talking to Tomoa, Flutterwave just came, and he was like, yeah. But he was not settled. Like he was up and about. Like so should we meet up? He said, I'm in SF. And sometime there was
San Francisco, not Silver
San Francisco.
And he's a man of God. To those type of places.
And so like there was some pressure within like Flutterwave, like, oh, we need to, like, Flutterwave at this time was like a lab. They were just making stuff. They were just making all kinds of things. They would literally just have an idea and like, you know, let's build it, right? And they're like, oh, we need to start taking this thing out to the market. Also probably because like their friends at Paystack, everybody was making us about their own stuff. And so GB just stepped into the conversation. And it was like, you know what, let's try and do it for like 3 months. But like Big Cabal started, Tomoa's lies were in my brain. I cooked. And I was like, sent an email like, yeah, like I really want to do this. Like I was even like, oh, I'm going to refund like the money, but I don't want us to continue this. I need to focus on Big Cabal. And GB was like, oh no, like don't worry, like just keep in touch. And we've just been guys since then, right? So
now we have Osage, GB, E asterisk, well, GBE, Chude, Tomiwa, Nadaya,
Nadadi.
Who else? Is there anyone else? So talk to me about all the things you learned from, like the defining lesson with each of those guys.
I think a common theme is ambition. I'm going to say very, very specific things. Osage, I used to tell Osage that he's Frank Underwood. I told him I saw a very, very sensitive side. Okay, keep close and say, why did he come from? I said, oh yeah, is that like you have this massive ambition, right? To become this really, really big, massive thing, and to lead this big, massive thing. And you're going to crush anybody in your way. That didn't stop you from that. Like Osage in the newsroom, his friends suffered the most, because if you're Osage's friends, you're going to work like thrice more than everybody else.
Shout out to Steve on AOT.
Those ones suffering, they just suffered. And like a lot of the time is how we ascribe respect to people. Then Chude is just this person who just like it's funny because I actually, now that I think about it, I see some of the traits I have from like what Chude has. Chude just believes that we can create a space for anything we want to do. And that's why if you look at the old Red Media website, you see all kinds of tiny experiments. Naturally, they'll consolidate and fold into each other and all of that. But he just tries stuff always. He has an experiment, he has an idea, he's going to try it, right? Tomoa's zone is that Big Cabal is important in media ecosystem. But like Tomoa is like we've not started. Because Thomas is looking at Bloomberg and he's like, Bloomberg is where Bloomberg is, FT is where it is. And Thomas is like, on the global table, if I cannot take Bloomberg's market, I can become, like, Big Cabal can become like the world's, like when they say, oh, in Africa, they think of Big Cabal, like on the global table, like, can Big Cabal become that thing? Like, that's the plan. And that's how he sees it. It's funny because in the context of GB, just from the conversations from the team, they just wanted to like make stuff, right? But like, if you look at like these people and even Nad, like Nad's own was that the original idea for Eden was to actually the original idea for Eden was to start a city from scratch. That's when you now think about it. Now his friend in Talent City, right? The idea was, you know, this city sucks, right? It has too much bad context. Let's see what it looks like to do one like from scratch. And it was when the from scratch, and so it was like they did pitch deck, everything. And the more they pitched it, the more they realized, nobody's going to give us any. And so they stripped it down to like the atomic units of a city, which is a home and like current services. So I think I've learned a thing or two from like being around very ambitious people, one, and just also being in spaces where by being around ambitious people, you start to ask yourself like, what is the ceiling of your own ambition? Yeah.
Okay. This I think is probably, we're getting to the end, but now you have like, we've referenced them I think throughout the course of this conversation, but you haven't actually spoken about them directly. So talk to me about Vistanium and Archiving, your two affiliate media products / businesses, and what like the solutions they're trying to solve.
So for Vistanium, right? It's funny that you call Vistanium a business.
Everything's a business.
Yeah. For Vistanium is like, again, a lot of the things I've like learned and experienced. What will happen if you take interesting people and get them to do interesting work? Some of it is media work, some of it is not. Yeah. It's also some of my learnings from like all these spaces. I know for a fact that the conventional like media model is the ratio of effort to reward is like 1 to 3, 1 to 4 at best, right? But it's like because I've worked like with or for or at startups, like technology startups, like I understand like what scale can do. And so for me with Vistanium is like I actually feel like it's barely started. For me, it feels like Vistanium still feels like where Stairs was before they had people on payroll, if that makes sense.
As someone who was part of the people before they put people on payroll, I know what you're talking about. Next
year, I believe it's going to shift. I mean, according to the roadmap, it has to shift. And the stakes getting way, way higher. Archiving is funny because like my plan was I'm just going to spend a lot of time on archiving. I'm going to spend all my time on Vistanium. And archiving is like you decrease, not on my watch. I mean, archiving is pretty much we want to make Nigerian history accessible. And we're like, we're making it accessible to everyone. And our primary format for now is newspapers, but that's not the last bus stop, right?
The thing we're going to work on together, you see? Exactly, that's why it's not going to be the last bus stop.
Yeah, it's not the last bus stop. And archiving is, and so everybody is like super excited about archiving. And it's also a problem where I'm like, yeah, everybody's excited, but I'm looking at what it needs to be, and I realize that we've only just hit the 1% mark.
It's still something.
Yeah, thank you.
And also, you have to understand, because you've been shaped by all these ambitious people, obviously you have very ambitious plans. Your 1% is like the average man's maybe like 5 or 10%. So you have to account for that tax.
Okay. So it's like because now, for example, now like it's like we are entering the stage where we're having conversations about what does I've already documented them now. I'm having it with people, with everyone, like what does this look like over the next 5-10 years, right? I'm telling the team every time that you guys, again, I need people to get so good that I become redundant because like I really just want to go back and write.
Yeah. No, I feel you. I feel
yeah.
you.
So, but Vistanium, right? When I think about Vistanium, in a sense, I've never said this publicly, right? I think of archiving as an iteration of what Vistanium's ideals are, which is what will happen if you take interesting people and get them to do interesting work. And so, for example, it's like there's something that's been kicking our ass since last year, but I've been working on quietly, Sun and Country.
Yeah, I know.
Looking forward to seeing that like early next year. I hope everyone finds it useful. But what we're trying to do is pretty much like a story-led guide to Nigerian Civil War, right?
Yeah.
In multiple formats. Couple of tiny experiments here and there, publishing essays. And again, not just any type of essays, like narrative nonfiction. I want to write, and I want people to write nonfiction that is so good that people ask if it is real. Because it is, for example, like Mr. Ethics, like, this is not real, right?
Yeah.
Right? Or Life of Murray is like, this is not real, right? Those are actually like real people. Yeah, so my reference, one of my biggest references for Vistanium and the story side is Epic Magazine.
Okay.
Epic Magazine is, do you know Argo? The movie, the one with Ben Affleck.
I know of it, but I never watched it.
Yeah, so it was first of all an essay.
Oh, okay.
And so like whenever like I write something on Vistanium and someone says, "Oh, this should be a movie," I know that. Yes.
Okay. Finally, we end this interview by I ask my guests 2 questions. One of them is if any 3, 4, 5 people you would like to see me have this conversation with, who would they be?
So in the spirit of meritocratic nepotism,
I know who you're going to say.
Nana.
We're working on that. So,
yeah. Nana is also an interesting example of just, and Nana's work ethic is ridiculous. It's almost unbelievable. It's funny because like Nana fired me off her podcast the first season. I couldn't keep up. Right? Like,
fair enough.
She literally just, we're in the same house and I just saw a message. I don't like your energy on this thing. You're not keeping up to the pace I want. And I just said I was moved from Slack.
Damn. Be your old man.
Yeah, so like Nana's work ethic is ridiculous. And it's how like she started off, she studied like entirely different stuff and then ended up in media, and she's currently in a phase where it's like, yeah, media, but like other types of media, like a less vertical approach to like media in context of like media and companies and journalism, and more like horizontal media everywhere. Yeah. Another person I'd like you to talk to, also to an extent, meritocratic nepotism, is Ted.
Who's Ted?
Ted is currently VP at Flutterwave.
Is Ted Nigerian?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. This is the first time on this show that someone has said a name
that you don't know,
and I didn't know who the person was.
I'm going to find more names that you don't know then. so Ted joined Flutterwave as a designer stroke engineer.
Yeah.
Interestingly, he joined, I mean, you know Okpe by virtue of Ururu.
Yeah.
You know Ururu, but you don't know Okpe.
Yeah, yeah.
So, both of them are interesting. It's always very interesting when I say this. But like, both of them joined, one joined Paystack as front-end engineer, designer, and the other one joined Flutterwave as front-end engineer, designer, coming from the same job, 2 of them, coming from the same manager, Ezra.
So different. So this essentially the same thing in like I get they're from the same school but basically different.
Exactly. So Ted joins, becomes a designer focused on just design, then becomes a design manager, then builds out like one of the biggest design teams in this country. Then Flutterwave like becomes a unicorn and becomes VP. And he's starting a company whose idea is stumbled on over brunch. So like, just really interesting example of like what can happen.
Yeah.
Like what is possible. Because like Ted also grew up with like 2 other guys. I call them, I have an unwritten essay called Ikorodu Boys, the original Ikorodu Boys. And it's just these 3 kids, Ted, Zlatan and Ashlocks, growing up in Ikorodu.
Oh my days, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Ashlocks is someone I'm chasing.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to get him.
Ashlocks is almost impossible to catch. Like
I'm really
Right.
hoping to get him next.
It's just really wild, right? You have Ted, who is like
Bro,
designer at the Unicorn.
what you just said is blowing my mind.
You're right. You have Zlatan, who fucking owns the streets. I have Ashlocks, who owns this global brand
Yeah.
by every definition of global.
Oh my, yeah.
All these 3 kids out of these streets in Ikorodu.
I didn't know this. So like I'm actually so mind blown by that.
So now that I say it, maybe I should actually invest in writing the Ikorodu Boys.
You should write it. You should actually write it.
Ashlocks is just hard to catch.
I'm learning that the 3 of them basically grew up at the same time, came from the same place.
Yeah.
Is just
Like,
that's interesting.
Another person that you should definitely bring on. I'm now forced to find someone you don't know.
You don't have to be like that, bro.
You've set me up. I'm thinking of someone that you should bring, which is useful for you because I'm helping you do an R&D now.
That's why I asked this question, because he inspires the people I'm going to look for next.
I think you should bring Toke on.
That would be interesting.
And I'll tell you why, right? The day, like, I convinced, like, Toke to join, like, Zikoko, that day, I could not afford her already. I knew that.
Yeah.
But the only thing was I told her that, you know what, if you join, we're going to travel around West Africa. And she was like, this guy's bullshitting, but okay. So she didn't even, she found what we were saying interesting, right? But Toke literally just, and it's an interesting way to think about success, because you'd expect that a person wants to come like, Toke just wants to live a very good life. And like she has hacked it, and it is just
I know.
beautiful to see. Toke, Boeing, that entire
yeah.
But
it's funny because I remember like when around the time when they joined Big Cabal, I think I used to follow, because then I used to put up periodic blasts looking for people. So I think I might have spoken to Boeing. I've definitely met in real life at least once.
Boeing Bobo.
But Toke, we might have exchanged DMs when nothing ever came of it. But we probably used to follow each other on Twitter for a bit. But I mean, I know what you're referring to. I know what you're referring to in terms of obviously having done it, but being able to hack it and like just travels now and lives the best life. Like I definitely see that.
It'd be hard to get Okwe here because she's
in the UK.
She's in the Obodo. She now has accent. Doesn't believe it, but
you never know. Maybe when the next time in the Obodo, I'll try and film with her.
1 year from now, when she can begin to admit it, Ruth,
okay,
Zachary, because like it's, I've not said this in public, right? But I think that like in like Zikoko's like return, right? I was very critical, right?
Yeah. But you think she was?
No, she was not there when we started.
Yeah.
She joined like 2020. And so there's a tendency for people who came after to be trapped in that shadow.
Yeah.
I don't know if this thing I'm saying makes sense, but I hope it makes sense. There's a tendency but like, so for me, like Ruka is like a symbol of what like Zikoko's next stage looks like. The way I said one year from now is I hope that 1 year from now she can, like, she has come like into our, can admit that there's a conversation to be had.
Okay.
Yeah, I've given you enough people.
Yeah. Final question. You've sat down with me. I think we've probably been at this for maybe like an hour and a half, if not longer. I've asked you a bunch of questions. Do you have anything for me? Is there question you'd like me to answer?
Like, So the first time he told me about overnight success, I was like, yeah, no, wala, because okay. But like when I actually thought about it, I was like, success is a funny word because it's not how I perceive
yourself.
Yeah, I actually feel like I just got out of boot camp, and I do not say this like as a modest kini.
Yeah.
I really just feel I'm going to be 32 in December, and I spent like most of my 20s like in boot camp, and I just feel I actually feel like I just started, right? Because quite frankly, when I look at like examples, right? Remember the 10-year thing I said, right?
Yeah.
Like you have someone like a DT, you have Sean. I have notes from Tomiwa's meeting with Jade in 2018 when she still sounded delusional. I still have notes because Tomiwa came back and downloaded to me, and I took notes from what like she told Tomiwa. And so like, so in my head I was like, I just got out of boot camp.
Yeah.
Why we have a conversation about overnight success?
Is that the question?
Yes.
So the reason why I think this is something I feel like we've kind of spoken about in the past, because you're not the only one. A lot of people have had issue with the idea of being.
Yeah. Also probably because I'm like super broke right now.
Well, but so I think the first thing is understanding that nothing. So we keep referencing this. You have referenced this 10-year thing a lot, and I think that is very important in this conversation because anyone that you are seeing is a product of 10 years of bootcamp.
Yeah.
So whatever version of themselves, whatever version that you are looking at, there's at least 10 years of work, of different learnings, different experiments, different things that have gone into it. So the idea is that you guys are coming here, we're having this conversation, and anyone who is listening to this can take, can take notes, and they can say, okay, this is how, these are the things, these are the steps that have helped this person become who they are. You came into the room and someone called you a legend, and you had an issue with it because you don't see yourself as that. But that's how the person felt. That's what the person, that's the regard the person holds you in. So you want a situation where everyone who thinks you're a legend is coming to watch this video, listening to this conversation, and they can take things that will help them on their own paths to becoming legends. So that's it. That's simple. That's like the best explanation I can give you. Well, thank you very much, Fuad, for joining us today. I mean, the thing is, we have deep conversations all the time, but like, I love that with this one, we got it on camera, and I really got to like hear a lot about your story. Because even as someone who I would say you're my friend, I'm still feeling like, you know, there's that. I didn't know certain things. Like I'm learning certain things today. Yeah. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Catch you guys this time next week.